Hi, everyone. This is Craig Zelzer from PCDN here with Joan Marie Godoy for season 10. I think this is episode 10. I hope I'm in the right number of the Social Change Career podcast. Today, we're going to be talking about accelerate change everywhere you go. A couple of just logistical things for people who may not have been in our podcast before. It'll go for about an hour. We love to hear from people attending or watching, particularly on LinkedIn. So to start off, please let us know, at any time throughout the session where you're watching from. And also, please, we want to bring in your questions and comments, so you can put in the chat section, and throughout this. This will be recorded and left on LinkedIn and YouTube, and then within about 2 to 3 weeks, it'll be converted to one of over 100 episodes of the Social Change Career podcast. And one thing we ask, if you're open to doing, check out the episodes. They're amazing, with innovators doing honest career conversations about social impact, both the challenge and the opportunities. So take a listen. And also, if you are open to rating the podcast, that's the one ask. If you watch this for more than 5 minutes, think about rating us on whatever podcasting platform. So Joan is joining us from Miami. We're based in Colombia. And I will summarize her bio and then we'll jump right in. So Joan has been a connector all of her life and really dedicated to advancing social impact in many forms. As I said, she's based in Miami, and she leads Radical Partners, a Miami-based social impact accelerator that invests in leaders and engages in locals and co-designs coalitions to strengthen communities. I mean, that's such an amazing mission, and not just mission, but in terms of execution. She spends her time promoting opportunities and elevating leadership and community engagement programs. They have something like 10 Days of Connection in Miami, which is all about bringing together the social impact community. They also offer strategic consulting, work in coalitions, and all about advancing change. She's also one of the co-founders of the Fuckup Nights movement in Miami. And if you don't know it, we're not trying to curse on purpose. It's fine to curse. But Fuckup Nights is really, she'll tell you more about it, but look them up, both in terms of Miami. It's a global movement. And I have actually used some of their resources in teaching, and they're incredible. I'm a board member for the Women's Fund of Miami-Dade and a proud alumni of the World Economic Forum's Global Shapers community, and an idealist by choice, because there's definitely a lot to be a pessimist, to have a pessimistic perspective these days. She's also a clinical psychologist, which I didn't know until we got ready for this, and a master's degree in international NGOs, and has over 15 years experience in intercultural work and social impact work, having worked in the US, Guatemala, the Netherlands, Costa Rica, Chile, and other locations. So again, just to reiterate, we'd love to hear from people. Thank you, Ali. Let us know where you're watching from. So as we go throughout the beginning, feel free to say, hey, I'm watching from whatever country, and maybe a sentence or two about your background. And Joan, thank you so much for waking up early. We're always up early because our kid goes to school. In Colombia, they get picked up way too early. But can you talk a little bit about the type of change that you either throughout your career have been trying to advance, or what you're working on more currently?
Awesome. Thank you so much, Craig, for having me here. It's bright and early in Miami, and so you get the first words of my day. We'll see how that goes, because my English takes time to wake up, just like me. But to answer your question in terms of what change we are trying to create, I would say that Radical Partners is issue agnostic, right? We know that no matter where you are, there are different societal challenges or issues that we all try to tackle. But I would say the ones that are common and pressing in this moment in time, I would say anything related to climate, right? So climate sustainability, I would say gender equity, and anything that has to do with historically marginalized groups. And then I would say economic mobility. We know that all humans want to not only feel loved and feel like they belong, but have opportunities and have access to deciding what they want in their lives. So when it comes to the change that we accelerate, I would say that we invest in both NGOs, right, or what in the US we know as nonprofits, and social ventures that are trying to advance any any of these causes, right? Whether that's in climate, whether that's in gender, whether that's in education, etc. We don't necessarily care that much about what you're focused on, as long as you're trying to solve a societal challenge and solving an issue. And we help you more think about how are you going to make that happen, right? What is that change that you're going to try to create, but how are you going to make it happen, and how are you going to sustain the activities and your mission to advance that and to contribute to them.
And can you talk a little bit about your career journey? So, from clinical psychology, did you operate as a psychologist or therapist, either individually or in organizational settings? And like, if you think back to your younger years, I mean, we're still young, but what were you aspiring to do, and like, how did you go from psychology to, let's say, collaboration and social impact?
It was all part of a plan. And then, of course, like, plans don't necessarily go as originally planned. But since I was a teenager, I knew that I wanted to work in the development field, right? Mostly around communities, right? And social psychology. But that wasn't an option in my home country, Guatemala. So I said, okay, what's the most similar thing to social psychology? So back then, when I was 18, I thought, okay, clinical psychology sounds like they can get me through the university years so that then I can do what I want, right? So I went through 5 years of clinical psychology in Guatemala, but at the same time, I was very conscious that that wasn't going to get me to where I wanted, which back then was to work for the United Nations, right? So at the same time, I had a job to sustain and to have a car and pay for my things, but I started volunteering very young. Since very young, right? So that's where I got involved in the nonprofit world, working with, back then it was like Liga Guatemalteca de Higiene Mental. So it was more around mental health and the restoration of the societal weave, I would say, right after the internal conflict in Guatemala. So that was my first job. And then I started working for another small nonprofit where I spent almost 4 to 5 years of my career as a volunteer, and then started working there, teaching mostly rural leaders on how to teach about human rights, equity, mental health, and again, weaving the community around certain issues. But I always knew that I wanted to get into international organizations, right? So a course here and there on project management, gender equity, participación ciudadana, right? Community engagement. And at the same time, I had this very big passion for travel, right? So wherever there would be an opportunity for me to either study abroad or work abroad, I would take it. And going through that ladder or through that road, I finally applied and got a job in the UN. Back in 2005, coordinating a program for economic empowerment for rural women in Guatemala. And I will abstain myself from using the word hate, but it definitely wasn't my place, right? So it's funny how you keep holding on to this dream, and once you're there, you're like, this is not actually what I wanted and what I expected. So I'll pause there, because that's kind of what took me to where I am now.
Okay, wonderful. And just to welcome a few people. So welcome Jennifer from Kenya. Ali, let us know where you're watching from. Jennifer's working in food security. People from the UK, Krista from Switzerland, awesome. Adrian, and then Abu from Bangladesh. So great to see so many people here. And please, as we're going throughout this, let us know where you're watching from and start putting your comments or questions at any point. So this is a really good question, and I'm glad you're talking about kind of the vision or the reality of the job doesn't always match the vision doesn't always match the reality. Mm-hmm. So, if your dream, or at least part of your dream when time you're 18 was to work for the UN, you finally landed that dream job. Because that's happened to me, where I won't go into too many details, but I've lived in many different countries, and I once moved overseas for a job. They sponsored my visa. I won't get into too much detail. And to be 100% honest, I got depressed. I just like it was a dream job, policy and all this stuff. And I got depressed. I was not happy. And it came to the point, and I quit after like 3 months. And my work, they liked my work, but it just was not, I can't put an explanation, but it didn't match it. And that's a whole nother story. But so what did you do both internally and externally? Did you stay in the job? What did you learn? And then if that was like the not the ultimate goal of your career, but at least part of it? Like, how did you figure out where to go next?
Yes. So thank you for sharing that, Craig, and hopefully we'll get to talk more about that, right? Because the job is not only necessarily what you do on a daily basis, is who you're working with and what's the context around you, right? So um, I think after moving to so many different places, and I see some people in the chat that are joining from all over, I think there's like a 2-year cycle, right? That gets you to feel very competent, and for you to say like, okay, is this I'm finally here, and is this what I want, right? Because it takes you a few months to learn the job, then to learn the culture, to learn how to operate. So after like a few months, you're like, okay, I'm ready to do things, right? So then you start trying to do things your way. Um, and if frustration kicks in, I think most of us in the social impact space have certain grit and are very resilient, right? So we keep trying. But after a year and a year and a half, I started being miserable, right? Like there was such a big gap between what we were trying to do and what I was seeing on the field, right? So I was supposed to empower 1,600 women in their own entrepreneurial ventures. The reality is that on the ground, they were asking their husbands for permission to attend a workshop. So that inconsistency of what was needed on the field and what was required of me on paper, plus the bureaucratic culture and the very competitive culture. I was young and passionate, and I said, this is not for me, at least not right now, until I gain either more skills or more power to come back and shift things. So I decided to quit. So after two years in a job almost, I decided to quit very responsibly, right? I let them know a few months in advance, got everything settled, and I wrapped up my journey there.
So welcome, Mariam from Iran, Samaru, I think you're the first person from Cape Verde, Tembe from Zimbabwe, Eunice from Nigeria. So great to see. Let us know if you have any people from Latin America or the US. So can you talk about, so you develop psychology skills, community organizing skills. And so if you think back to landing the job at the UN, whether it was the right job or not, like a lot of people dream about working for a multilateral or an INGO.
Mm-hmm.
And so, there's the bureaucracy, there's the mismatch between what the vision of the project, I call it the projectification of social change. It's not just my word, but
Mm-hmm.
it's like social change is complicated and requires ecosystems, and so much of what happens in the development sector, I mean, a lot of good happens, but a lot is like projectified into these little discrete projects with like metrics, and it just, real life doesn't always work that way. But can you talk about what skills did you develop either through your academic training or the workshops? Like if you think back to when you were a student, even to where you are today, like what skills have you found most valuable across your career? And for people, whether they're early stage or mid-career, what skills do you recommend that people develop to both to do good, ethical, partnership-driven work, but also not burn out?
Mm-hmm. That's a great question, and I have so many inputs there. I see that Kathy from Miami is joining. Hi, Kathy. So I think as either as cheesy or as simple as it sounds, you need to know what you want, at least right now, not forever, right? But know what you know, what you want and what's next in your career. Because don't get me wrong, some people love working for the UN, right? Like it brings a lot of positive things, right? Like the influence that you can have, the budgets that you manage, certain ease that you have to run things, right? Like some people love it and some people excel at that bureaucracy and the diplomacy that it involves. Some of us are more scrappy in the good sense, right? Like we want to get our hands dirty and do the thing. So when it comes to the things that I learned and the skills that I've gained over the years that not only led me to where I am today, but I literally use them every single day. I would say number one would be project planning. So if you can go online, take a small course, or get credit on project planning, it is something that will literally help you in every single thing, either by running your home or running an organization, right? Like that ability to understand what is my objective, what is that ultimate goal that I want to achieve, what are the resources that I need to make that happen, what does my timeline look like, and that ability to plan backwards to make sure that you have enough milestones and enough things to do to get you to that objective, right? And that ability to then say, okay, we reached our goal, we met that objective, what's next, right? What's our new project? So definitely project planning. The second one, I would recommend a book by Priya Parker that's called The Art of Gathering. As much as I would love to give credit to her, I have to give the credit to my mom in learning that art of gathering, right? Same thing. Who are we bringing together for what? What is the occasion? And therefore, what's our list of guests, right? What are we going to give them, etc. And that translates very well into community work, right? And understanding who are your stakeholders or your shareholders. How do we want them to feel? What do they want them? What do we want them to do? What's that call to action, right? So the ability to take care of every single gathering and every single encounter in a very thoughtful and meaningful way has definitely been very helpful to me. Um, and thirdly, whatever word resonates with you, right? If you are an empathetic human being, great. If you are not, that is hard to learn. So I would say care, right? If you're not empathetic by nature, I would say start by caring, because when you care, you listen actively. And when you listen actively, you learn constantly. So you basically become a human library on many very different topics. But aside from satisfying your curiosity and gaining knowledge, it allows you to really understand what do they want, what do they need. And with the idea that I said at the beginning of like, when you know what you want and what you want to do, it allows you to meet halfway and therefore operate in a very consensual way. And when it comes to social impact, we know that we need everybody involved, right, to advance agendas in a very different way. So I would say that those three skills have been with me for 15 years plus, and they have led me to succeed in whatever I propose I want to do next.
Wonderful. Welcome also, Amber, and please, keep letting us know where you're watching from, and we'd love to hear questions or comments. You can just put them in the chat. So 2 questions. One is, if you think back across your career to date, can you give an example of a type of collaborative, networked social change that either you've been a leader of or helped facilitate, and what actually has resulted as in part due to the effort of yourself or your teams? And then, I've taught classes on facilitation, and there is an art to community gathering, whether it's in a company, a nonprofit, a village. Obviously you've talked about some good resources. How else do you learn how to do this? And do you have any other favorite online courses or in-person courses, or do you offer things, or, how do you, part of it, you learn it by doing, but you can't just read it. So how do you best learn how to design and convene for impact?
Mm-hmm. Okay. Let me try to come up with a mini course on the spot. Because then you asked about examples, right? And I think the first things that come to mind are when you're a student, or when you are working at an organization, whatever your possibilities are. I think there are moments in your life where you get to try to fix something or improve something, and you need to rally people around that, right? Because if you're the only one that asks for a certain thing, they might listen to you and they might do something. But when it's 10 or 15 of you, then that goes a long way, right? So whether you decided to run a club at your school, or run an organization if you went to university, or to rally your coworkers around certain things at your workplace, I think that's where you can start learning to use that skill, right? And it starts with, what is that vision, right? Like, what is that objective? and thinking, what do I need to make that happen? And then sharing that vision in a very convincing way to people, right? So it requires some storytelling and some convincing and a very clear call to action to whomever you're pitching, right? So this is what we need to do. So let's meet this time at this date, or you need to sign here, right? Like a very concise call to action is what actually gets people to mobilize, because then now I understand why and I understand what I need to do, right? So when it comes to examples, I can think of when we co-started the Alumni Association of Holland students in Guatemala. So that was one. Then the 1 billion rising movement, that's also a global movement, right, to promote gender equity and to fight violence against women. So I did that in Guatemala and Costa Rica. But back then I did it very naturally, right? Like I didn't think of myself as a convener, as a collective impact leader. It all started when I came to Miami in 2017, and Radical Partners, which wasn't mine back then, we were leading an initiative that's my favorite so far in the 30 plus years of life that I have, is called the 10 Days of Connection. And the initiative, which is now a movement, right, what it tries to do is to encourage people to connect across lines of difference, right? The more different and the more taboo, the more difficulty there is amongst the relationship, the better for us, right? So we talk to Muslims and Jews, and they come together to host something. Democrats and Republicans hosting a happy hour. You name it. Like when you think of those stereotypical groups that historically have been opposing each other, we bring them together so that we can not only find our similarities, but celebrate our differences. So when I came in 2017, that was the first year they did it. And the first year was more like a festival, right, of connection. So people would say, oh, I made a new friend, and I went to this place. So when I saw that project and took over, I said, like, we have to dig deeper here, right? Like we need to keep adding layers to this initiative, because as long as human conflict prevails, which if you ask me, I think that will be forever, this initiative needs to exist in order for us to create not only the spaces where we can convene, but make them safe for people to show up as they are and feel safe at it. And thirdly, to facilitate conversations and interactions that will allow us to look past the labels. So it goes back to what I was saying before. We were very clear on what is it that we're trying to accomplish. How are we going to do that? And for this initiative, we realized that we cannot host the amount of experiences that we want to host with the 10 Days of Connection. So we put a lot of attention and a lot of intention in assembling a host committee that's with every year is between 150 and 200 organizations that come together for this particular cause. And it is because we understand who they are. We've built trust with each of them. We understand the issue areas that they care about. And we tell them, this is not only related to your mission, but this is a duty that you have to weave the community in Miami. So once we tell them, like, join us, we give them every single thing that they could need in order to make their job easier, right? And that is a social media toolkit. How can you host this event? Give us all the information. We'll manage the calendar, etc. So we take some of the responsibility out of them, right? Because in the end, it's our initiative, it's our movement. We make it easier for them, and they just have to worry about the original intention, which is bring people together for a particular connection experience, and make that happen. So if you're curious, you can go to 10daysofconnection.org. It's going to happen between May 1st and May 10th. Now in the next week, you can check the calendar. There are virtual experiences for all of those who are joining from abroad. You can join one or two that are virtual. And then if you're in Miami, by all means, join us. And when you see all those logos and when you see what we do, if you like it, Radical Partners would be more than happy to teach you how to do it, right? And so we offer coaching hours, we offer trainings, and we even offer our consulting services. If you're trying to build a coalition and a movement, we'd be more than happy to help you.
Well, I'm impressed that you're so calm that with the event taking place very soon. So thank you for making time. Can you talk a little bit also just from previous years? Obviously, COVID probably interrupted some, but in terms of 150 to 200 partners, but how many? If you think back to how you're sharing the results or impact or the funding, the the return on investment. Not that everything has to be a return, but how do you demonstrate to the larger community with your partners that this is a good use of time, resources, and energy?
So that's the question, right, Craig? Because the 10 days of connection is the project or the program that's harder for us to fund and harder for us to share our impact. Because with other programs is a bit more tangible, right? Like, you give us this amount of money, this is what we're going to do, and these are the skills that we're going to build. But with this particular initiative, it's a long-term investment, right? Like, aside from running a longitudinal study of, like, if you were openly a racist towards a certain community, the only way in we can measure if we change your mindset is over the years, right? And asking you a very deep questions. And we're not there yet, especially because this movement tries to have like a massive reach. So the way we measure impact is by measuring how many people are coming together around this initiative, meaning the host committee, right? So again, saying that every year we bring together 200 organizations for one cause is definitely one of the ways in which we measure impact. Secondly, not only that number, but how many connection experiences they come up with or they put together, and how many hosts hosted one particular connection experience, right? So that's an evolution over the year. The first year we had more than 100 events. This year we're going to have 50 because we're encouraging people to collaborate with each other. So that's another way we're measuring our impact. Then definitely assistance to the connection experiences. How many locals are we rallying around this event? Who's showing up? And then we definitely have a survey in which we ask, like, what's your biggest takeaway? We ask some qualitative information. But to me, my favorite measure of impact is we ask if because you attended this connection experience, you're most likely to stop being a bystander when you witness an act of injustice, whether on the street, if you're in the bus, etc. If you're willing to do something when you see that someone is discriminating or hating actively. So that's how we measure our impact. But when it comes to our ROI, right, and our sponsors, the reality is that the sponsors that give funding for this initiative, they really believe in what we're doing and why this matters, right? And of course, we need to be smart on how to tie it to either their marketing budgets or their community engagement budgets so that they can sponsor the initiative. But it comes to someone that's willing to invest in something that we know that we need as human society, even if there's not like a super tangible thing at the end, even though an impact report goes a long way and we're able to pull that together after the 10 days every year.
Okay, wonderful. So welcome El Haji from Senegal, James, I think from Kenya. So lots of Mohammed, I think from Lebanon. So again, love to hear your questions and comments, and please let us know where you're watching from and a bit about your backgrounds, because I don't want to be the only person asking questions. So one thing here is, can you talk a little bit? So Radical Partners is it's a for-profit, it's a company, and you have like a nonprofit arm. And yeah. So can you talk a little bit, since you're the leader, within a team, for people who aspire to, some people aspire to be leaders, or, everyone has leadership qualities. Some people want to be more in charge of, so helping to run a company and, associated nonprofit or with a fiscal sponsor, like, is your time 90% generating budgets and revenues? Is it managing team? Like, obviously it varies week to week, but what are the things you love about kind of being a little bit more in a leadership role? Because you get to be creative and represent the organization and build ideas, but how much is like just doing the admin and day-to-day? Like, how much, if you think about like the good stuff that you love doing and the things that you just have to do to sustain and keep the team going, like, how do you allocate your time? And what are the wonderful things about being a leader, and what are some of the challenges for anyone who aspires to lead an organization, whether it's for-profit or nonprofit?
Mm-hmm, mm-hmm. You're coming up with good questions today, Craig. So let me share to answer a little bit about Radical Partners, right? Because Radical Partners is rare and one of a kind, and I'm hoping that in the future when we look at this podcast, we will no longer be rare, because that's the way we found as being the most sustainable when it comes to accelerating change, right? So we are a hybrid organization, as I like to say, especially for those in the LGBTQIA space, is that we're a non-binary organization, meaning that our revenue streams comes from two different piles of funding, right? One is we have a fiscal sponsorship, which allows us to operate as an NGO. And therefore, we apply to grants and we get grants to deliver free programming, mostly in our leadership development and community engagement pillars. So that's one side of the organization. But the other one is after delivering program from several years, we realized that we had something to give and to share and to teach. So now we have a big consulting arm that brings basically like 50% of our revenue now, in which we provide coaching, trainings, and every single piece of project management, right, from program design all the way to evaluation. So we offer our services, which allows us to operate as a company. So I think we get to use and explore the best things of both worlds, but we also inherited the worst thing of both worlds, and nobody really gets us, right? Only people who are visionary enough to understand, okay, I understand your mission, and how you do it doesn't really matter. But those people are still rare for us, right? So when we apply to grants, we have to enhance the idea of these are the programs, fund our programs, and when we sell our services, we have to enhance that part, right? So it's like I always tell people, is like you have your closet, right? And you have your set of clothes, and you have to choose what to wear what day, depending on who's ready to understand and to see you that way. So all that to say that I think leading an organization like that, or any company in general, I always say that it's both exciting and exhausting. And who doesn't tell you that, they're lying, or they're not conscious about it, right? Because it's definitely exciting for you to see yourself in this role where you get to shape things internally and externally, especially if you're such a vocal leader like I am, right? Like you get to shape and influence certain spaces, and that's amazing. But it's also exhausting, right? Because it comes with a lot of responsibilities and with a lot of that back end work that you were saying, Craig, especially when you have a growing team, to make sure that they're representing the organization well, that they're advancing the agenda well, etc. So that piece, especially if you're such a passionate leader and so excited about changing things, that managerial side might not be as exciting, which is my case. So I am very intentional, Craig, about how I spend my days, and making sure that I'm not only doing what's needed for the organization, but that I'm also doing things that bring me joy, and that I myself also have an ROI, so that I can be a better leader, right? So an idea that I can share with whomever's watching is that I have intentions per each day of the week. Because sometimes you have a very tight agenda, and then you end up not doing what you wanted or what you needed, right? So I also allow myself to be flexible in terms of how I use and move my schedule, but I make sure that Mondays I use them to plan. So this is when I meet with my team, have meetings of like delegating things, prioritizing things. Tuesdays, I use them for quiet work myself, right? What can I learn? What can I do? What can I review? So no meetings as much as possible. Wednesdays is my day to give, and therefore to meet with people, which is this is a great example, right? It's like you asked me to be on your podcast. Yes, I'm giving my time to you. On Thursdays, I try to strategize or to teach things. So that means that these are the days where I'm either delivering workshops, or I am having like more thoughtful meetings with my team or with potential clients. Fridays, I use them to raise funds for Radical Partners and to reflect on certain things. So I have longer meetings, maybe outside, breakfast, lunch, with potential funders and potential project partners, I would say. Saturdays, no work. I use them to love my people, to call my mom, to call my nieces. And then on Sundays, I make sure that I get to reset. So that's either a longer shower, a longer bath, a massage if I get lucky that day. And I try to repeat that every single day. And of course, that schedule looks differently, but I make sure that I'm doing everything that's needed for the organization and to sustain myself as a leader to keep shaping things.
Wonderful. I love the kind of explanation of the day-to-day approach and kind of the joy that you're showing in it. And when we do, sometimes at PCM, like a friend of ours trained us, like, in lean startup methodology and time blocking. So when we use it and kind of plan out in 2-week blocks and have like a focus, our work is much better. We don't always do it. Actually, we infrequently do, but when we do it, it's like so much more joyful and focused versus like kind of haphazard running around like, so lots of questions are coming in. So thank you, everyone. And just my quick question on that is that, that kind of organizing philosophy, is it something you created, you adapted from someone else? And is there a name for it, in terms of because part of it's time blocking, but like that day by day focus, like what would you name it, or where did you get the idea?
I don't know. Mm-hmm. I think I came up with it, not the time blocking, right? Like the time blocking, I learned it from the founder of Radical Partners, Rebecca Fishman-Lipsey. She was very good at time blocking, right? But then I realized that actually stressed me more than what it helped me, right? Because I would say, I'm going to work 2 hours in this grant. And then if I couldn't, or if I worked more, I would feel bad about it, right? Because I didn't do what I was supposed to do. So then I think I'm very good at detecting trends, right, Craig? So it was like, okay, let's zoom out. What am I spending my time on? How do I want to spend my time? And therefore came up with this intention. So they're at the top of my calendar, right? And I have to confess that I use emojis. So it's like, I even have like the emojis that replicate like, okay, Tuesdays you get to work, right? So it's a computer. Wednesdays you give. So I don't know.
What's the emoji for giving?
The hands.
Okay. I would encourage you, and then we'll move to the questions, to either, doesn't need a name, but like either name this something or do like a short video. It could be like 2 minutes, just sharing like how, like, your 7 days approach, and, other people could adapt it for themselves. It's cool. So first questions from El Haji, I think based in Senegal. I could be wrong about this. Just so how, it's for you in general, how can you work together? She talked about the 10 days, but like if people want to either engage with you, learn about what you do at Radical Partners, and also please put in a plug for Fuckup Nights as part of this question, or just learn, like how can, whether someone's in Miami or Senegal or Lebanon, how can people engage with both Radical Partners and also put in a plug for Fuckup Nights?
Thank you so much for the question. And yes, we can definitely do things together, right? So to make that tangible, I will insist that the 10 Days of Connection is coming up, right? From May 1st to May 10th. So if you go to 10daysofconnection.org, you can scroll through the calendar and see if you want to join, also with the time difference, right? To see if you want to join some of the virtual sessions. If you can, great, be our guest. If you can't, hopefully this will inspire you to do something wherever you are, because the connection experience could be as intense, as small, or as big as you'd like. So this could be like, maybe during the 10 days of connection, you just invite your 5 neighbors to come and for a potluck, right? Like, do you know their names? Do you know what they do? Why don't you just come together, maybe right in the middle of the street, enjoy a potluck, and just get to know each other as people? And that's the one thing you can do. But if you want to bring this to your city, we'd be more than happy to expand, right? We expanded to Broward, and we are in conversations with other countries, and we have the package ready to bring this to your city and to help you become that convener wherever you are. So that's with the 10 days. When it comes to Radical Partners, we would love to learn about what you're doing and where you're doing it, right? Because we also learn from you. So if you want to go to radical.partners, that's our website. If you can subscribe to our quarterly newsletters, we don't spam anybody. We send things every 3 months or so. We would love to have you in our database and just to reach out with what we're doing. And last but not least, if you like what you see and if you think we can add value to the work that you're doing, we'd be more than happy to come to you, wherever that is, to deliver workshops, to host conversations, to operate as a consulting partner Because let's go back to Radical Partners being a social impact accelerator, right? So we don't work with people in the idea stage. We work with you if you're already doing something and you're ready to scale that work, right? You want to have more impact. You want to think bigger. We always say boldly, smartly, kindly. We'd be more than happy to go and to share some of the resources and the tools that we've learned over the years.
Okay. And then can you also just put a plug in for Fuckup Nights, what they do and what you do in Miami, just and how people can engage, how many cities they're in, and their resources?
Yeah.
And just one pre-question, I mean, I've been following their work for years, but I'm just curious, like when you say that to people who don't know what it is, because like, do they go in shock, or like, what is the typical reaction? So
yeah, it's definitely a hot topic, right? That's what I was going to say. You're welcome, Fuck Up Nights, for the plug, because Fuck Up Nights is one of those things that I started doing on a side, and now that I'm leading Radical Partners, we see Fuck Up Nights as one of the networks that we curate and we run, right? But Fuck Up Nights is a movement in itself. So building this parentheses right now, right? Fuck Up Nights started 10 years ago in Mexico City. And it was the result of a conversation between 5 friends that were entrepreneurs or pursuing different career paths, and they started talking about all the things that weren't going well for them. And they said, wait, so I made the same mistake, why did you make the same mistake, why haven't we read about this? And they started exploring, like, it's because nobody shares their failure stories, right? Like, we just hear either failure stories from very famous people, or we hear when, yes, there was a failure, but now I'm here and I'm successful, right? So they said, let's start having these conversations about what did we do or what didn't we do that led us to fail in this particular thing. So that's the concept of a Fuck Up Night. 3 to 4 speakers come in to share their stories, but they share about not only what happened, but how it happened, right? And that's the biggest gift that you can take away from a Fuck Up Night. Shall I be making partnerships with my friends? Should I be signing contracts? Like, should I be looking for scam? Like, you hear about all these things and how they happen and how they made people feel, and that's what you learn, right? So it is now in more than 60 countries and 200 cities around the world. So wherever you are, try to find one that's close to you. And then in 2019, we came up together with 5 other Latinos in Miami, and we started the movement in Miami. So you basically get to pay a franchise to the Fuck Up Nights movement and bring that idea to your city. And you get to do with that what you want, right? So in some cities, they're very based, or they're very focused on the entrepreneurial ecosystem and the tech ecosystem, and they talk about failure there. In Miami, we try to host every single event in Espanol, to make sure that we're featuring different Hispanic professionals and to break some of the stereotype that exists about Latinos and Latinas in the United States, and to show how badass we are. And last but not least, the word is always a mini fuck up, right? So some people are ready to be raw and to swear and to say fuck ups as often as we need. But for some people that aren't and yet are ready to talk about failure, Fuck Up Nights came up with the idea of the Failure Institute. So if you cannot bring or don't want to bring a fuck up night, you can bring the Failure Institute to wherever you are.
Sorry, just unmuting. Thank you so much. I've been to some Fail Fest, and it's often, it can be a separate event or integrated into a bigger event. And often it's like the most insightful and funny and, humane event. And, a friend of mine, I mean, you can check out the organization now, Women International Leadership and Development. Her conference is next week, but this is a previous organization. I'm just saying, and she told a story, I won't share it, but just like the vision of doing something and everything seemed right, but just the hilarity of the assumptions we make, and it's also real. So I think storytelling and sharing honestly is so incredibly powerful. And I've fucked up so many times, and sometimes I learn great things, other times I don't. But it's like that, like not everything is easy in social change or entrepreneurship or impact. So next question comes from Eddie. I think he's based in Maryland. How can we continue to include those who've been impacted by the criminal justice system in these conversations? So I guess, 1, any thoughts in general, and 2, in your work with Radical Partners, in terms of Miami-Dade County or Broward or your work overseas, like how have you interfaced with organizations either representing or serving those who've been impacted by criminal justice.
I love that you brought that question to the table, Eddie. And we have the privilege of working with several organizations that are giving second opportunities, right, to people that have made a mistake. And we have an alumni of our Radical Partners programs that she says, we make sure that your greatest mistake doesn't get to define the rest of your life, right? So we work with people like them that treat incarceration as a family affair. We work with another organization, with Mark Mitchell, that makes sure that young folks have a second opportunity. And one of my favorites is called Leap for Ladies, and they go inside the institutions and they teach entrepreneurship to women. And then once they're out, they employ them. They make sure that they have a second opportunity, right, as a first job opportunity. So what they have is a thrift store, or actually like a thrift boutique. And I shop a lot of my things there. And you go in, the cashier and the one that is arranging the clothes, etc. There are women that just left the institution, and they're ready for that second chance and thirsty for that second chance, but not necessarily everybody's open to do that. So what I admire about these three organizations is that they not only support the community, but there's something in the mindset that they shift, that this is part of your experience, own it and make it part of your power, right? So they are open about not necessarily the crime or what they did, but yes, their journey, right, and how that changed them. And that positions them in a very different way, because then they're no longer hiding their past, but actually leveraging that and going back to careers, right? Like leveraging that experience as part of your profile. And therefore you come with a particular skill set that employers and organizations that are open to that perspective and to that experience will then like come up with a good mix, right, to advance certain issue areas. So to answer your question, Eddie, to be more precise, I would say if you are an employer, make sure that you give an opportunity for people, right? Either by not checking their background, right? So that would go a long way. And if you do, make sure that that doesn't stop them from applying or for actually being a candidate that's going to be considered, right? That's if you're an employer. If you're seeking for a job and you have this experience, like try to get close to an organization that serves people like you, so that they can teach you how to shape your profile, how to work on your online presence in a way that makes you feel proud of where you've been, and most importantly, where you want to go. And thirdly, if you are neither an employer or an employee and you want to build a collective, I can guarantee no matter where you are that there are organizations that work with these populations. So just make sure that you knock on their door, and they will probably need your help for XYZ, and the collaboration can start right there.
Wonderful. Thanks so much, Eddie, for the question. And Joan, and just a couple organizations. So Cornbread Hustle is doing great work on this. The Open Hiring Movement, Greystone Bakery, if anybody likes Ben & Jerry's ice cream, they often will supply the brownies. And a lot of times I've given, I mean, it's not healthy, but they're delicious. I've given them as gifts to people. You can order them online. And so they have a philosophy. Open hiring is basically, you can come in and a whole bunch, Greystone is one of the pioneers, and that they'll hire anybody and give them a chance. It's called open hiring. It doesn't mean they'll keep them, but it is like, whether you have a criminal record or something involved with the criminal justice system, they'll give you a chance. And there's a lot of organizations working in this in the U.S. Obviously it's a much broader systematic issue. So it's like we have more people in jail or prison or in parole than almost any country in the world. So there's a lot of structural inequalities. So it's not just one-on-one, but there's great things going on this way. So please, and feel free to share others. So Amber has a question. I think she's based in Upper Midwest. In terms of how in the world did you convince, whether it was you or the previous head of Radical Partners, so like how in the world did you get these 150 organizational partners together, or and then how does it function? And to get practical too in terms of things people might have interest in. Like, do you have favorite tools you use to convene? So is it all on Zoom? You do in-person meetings? You use Slack, or both in terms of how do you do it, like in terms of the vision, but like how does the execution work? And do you have any favorite tools to make it work better, at least from a systems perspective?
Yeah. I really appreciate your question, Amber, because it puts me on the spot to think about things that are very natural or intuitive to me, right? But I think it starts with you having enough relationships and enough good relationships for people to want to listen to you. Um, and what's funny is that for you to do that, right, for people to trust you and for people to show up for you and to listen to you, you need to do that first. So that could look like you building a database, as nerdy as that sound, right? If you have good memory, you have that database in your head, but it will help you to have it online, right? Who are your partners? What sectors are they in? What do they do, right? You really need to know the lay of the land to understand who you can play with. And I think it operates as a friendship, right? Like, who do you want to hang out with? Why? And what value can you bring, right? So once you identify and you build relationship with these people, then you can start asking for certain things. And if you're going to ask for the thing first, make sure that you do it in a way that resonates with them. Why do they need to trust you? Why do they need to listen to you? Why do they need to do what you're asking them to do? So you have to be very strategic about your approach. So going back to the platforms, I think that year one was a lot of phone texting and emailing of like, we're going to do this thing. Do you want to be part of this? Right. So it's expressing the vision in a very particular way. And once certain people tell you that they're in, we leverage them to get more people, right? So this is where the tools come handy, because we say, okay, we're a group of 50, but we want to grow this twice or thrice the size. Can you help us get people involved? Here's a form, here's a social media post. You basically have to do nothing but to send it out, right? So we make sure that people have the tools for that. Fast forward to this year, right? You go to the website and we tell you, if you want to host, this is what you need to know and this is what you want to do. If you're a participant, same thing, right? We have social media posts, etc., for the participants. So if I would get to summarize those steps, is find your galvanizers, right? Like, who are you bringing together? And they themselves are going to bring those people and invest in them. To have a very clear call to action and therefore make it easy. And thirdly, develop all the tools and everything that you need to achieve that objective. I think those three things can help. And last but not least, make sure that you have a structure and therefore a plan and a schedule and a strategy to manage all these people, or else they're going to take over your full agenda, right? Because then you've built such a good relationship that everybody wants to text you and to call you and to ask you things, etc. And it's very tempting and pleasing at the same time. But you need to make sure that over the years we've learned, okay, we'll have office hours at this particular time. There's this person that's going to be the point of contact. So you have to be very clear about the roles and the schedules to make sure that you guide everybody towards where you want to go.
Okay, so we're almost out of time. Thank you so much. So just two quick questions and then we'll wrap up. So just in terms of the tools, whether it's tech tools or facilitation tools, I mean, what are your go-to platforms? So is it Google Docs? Is it Evernote? Is it Notion? Like the ones that you find, obviously all tools have potential, but the ones you use the most that you would recommend others might check out. And then are you playing with any of the new AI components within those?
We're starting to, but I would say our organization operates with the following platforms. Google Drive is our office, right? Basically, this is where all the documents, where everything lives in Google Drive. I would say our Gmail is our phone line. This is where people ask us things. This is where we get back to them. This is how we communicate information, right? So definitely G Suite and Gmail. Then for internal team communications, we use Slack, right? Which is basically a chat for the company. We use Asana to project plan and to project manage and delegate tasks. And then Zoom, after the pandemic, definitely became our our meeting room, I would say. And going back to your question about AI, we started to use Otter.ai that takes notes for us during the meetings. So it saves us some energy and some effort there, and then we have all the notes right next to it. I think those five, and of course I could mention others, like Squarespace and social media for our website and our social media presence. But the good news is that there are, whatever you want and whatever you need, I think exists. And most importantly, I think it either is free or very affordable. And the last one that I will mention is Canva, because basically all of our designs, when it comes to proposals, social media posts, etc., we use Canva, and they have a very affordable rate for nonprofits and social impact organizations.
Yeah, we still use a graphic designer sometimes, but Canva is amazing. So, and then what do you do, on your days off, on Sundays or Saturdays? I mean, two questions. One is like, what are you currently doing around upskilling? Or it could just be what you're doing to develop personally, that you're comfortable sharing. And then what skills do you recommend others think about developing? Because the world of work and impact is changing so fast, like around where the jobs of the future might be.
Yeah. So I'm going to make the assumption that whomever is listening to this has a very particular passion and topic that they read often about, that they watch movies about, etc. So keep doing that. And aside from that, I would suggest learn something or absorb something or practice things around managing people, managing teams, managing communities. That people skills, right, and the leadership skills that it requires to manage folks in a sustainable way nowadays, where we are expected to care about the people that's working for us or with us. So any managerial skills, I think you could definitely upskill on that end. And I would say the same thing around tech and platforms, especially in the social impact space. We lead with so much passion and with such good intention, which is awesome, but oftentimes it's not necessarily the most efficient or the most effective way in which we can do things. So try to push yourself or to pull yourself outside of that comfort zone and just learn what people are doing in the tech ecosystem. It doesn't mean that you're going to replicate all of that, but I think it will challenge you on certain things. For example, like taking notes, right? I personally like taking notes, but now I have a robot that can do it for me. So it's good to know. And maybe I still choose to take notes, but I know that if I would want to save some time, I could do that. So yeah, managerial skills, tech skills, and keep building and learning on the topic of your interest.
Okay, and last question, 30 seconds. What book or show or movie, doesn't have anything to do with work, but what have you most enjoyed in the past 6 months that maybe has nothing to do with work, but just you recommend others check out?
So my favorite book, and something that I've been telling people significantly about, is The State of Affairs from Esther Perel. And she comes and challenges our concept of relationships and romantic relationships and how human beings perceive and operate, especially in the heterosexual world and monogamous world. So it's definitely come to open my mind and to support me in like some of my personal journey. So if you want to read that, either because if you're looking for a partner, you can read that. But if you're in a partnership, and especially in a marriage, I think it's a good book to read together or to listen to together.
Wonderful. Yeah, I don't love Bill Maher on HBO, but she was on his show last week, and she's very interesting and provocative. So to wrap things up, thank you so much for taking time out of your schedule, and that today is I think I forgot the name of today is partnerships or outreach, but thank you so much for sharing your wisdom and energy and vision. And please follow Radical Partners, follow Joan, check out 10 Days Connection. We'll share it on our channels. Please be in touch with her, or, if there's don't inundate her, but check out their work. Just a quick update. So we have lots of good podcast sessions coming up. So Friday, we're gonna have Spencer Campbell, who built out Recruiting for 1 Acre Fund, one of the leading social enterprises in Africa. The May 2nd, we'll have Darius Graham, who works on equity and justice and philanthropy in Baltimore. And then I think it's May 12th, I have to check the date, sometime in mid-May, Catalina Cook-Duque, who headed Mi Sangre, which is Juanes's foundation. If anyone knows Juan, everybody should know Juanes, one of the top climbing musicians. So she's an Ashoka Fellow. So lots of people are coming up. And then just that one request, please consider rating or sharing the podcast. And thank you so much, Joan. I hope you have a wonderful, amazing week, and that 10 days of connection goes amazing, and that it expands to 10 days of connections in many more cities. So thank you. And thank you everyone for joining us. Any last comment? I know you've got a meeting, but any last things you would say?
I just want to say thank you again for this full circle moment, and just to tell the audience to put some homework for you, Craig. I think you're also a great connector, right? So if they need any tips about building community and bringing people together and building bridges, that they could also reach out to you and the PCDN network that has been doing that for years.
Thank you so much, everyone. Have a great morning or afternoon.
Bye-bye.